What this initiative brings to the conversation is the issue of race and ethnicity. The nation's conversation about inequality has completely ignored the fact that we have a racialized class system in this country. And so the Color of Wealth Summit and the Closing the Racial Wealth Gap initiative is all a part of an effort to highlight the fact that people of color have been left out of the system for a very long time and then left behind once they were included. And so this is all about making sure that as we transition to a majority-minority nation, we have communities that have solid economic security and they can contribute fully to the economy. So the racial wealth gap is a term of art. It's focused on race, really, and ethnicity. African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, and many Asian Americans experience economic insecurity in their households. For every dollar of wealth held by the typical white family, the typical African American and Latino family only have 6 and 7 cents respectively. And so the racial wealth gap is the difference, that gap, the difference between people of color and whites. So at Global Policy Solutions, we focus on 4 key strategies: health, education, economic security, and civic engagement. We feel like if all of those factors are appropriately addressed, we can really make a dent in terms of addressing poverty and building the capacity of communities that have been vulnerable for many years. And so with that, the Closing the Racial Wealth Gap initiative is squarely within our economic security portfolio. However, it also intersects with our health work, because we find that in the area of health, low-income communities are often the most vulnerable. It also fits into our education work, that children who are low income tend to get the least and worst quality education. And so we view this as what we call intersectionality, working on key core areas that actually intersect, and we bring this knowledge together so that we can actually use it in every area. We're a team. We're a nation, Team USA, if you will. And the fact of the matter is that the team's demographics is changing. The nation will become majority-minority by the year 2043. By the year 2019, all children under the age of 18 will be majority, quote-unquote, minority. And so these are our workers. This is our future workforce. These are the people who are going to have to pay Social Security, pay taxes for bridges and roads and mail delivery and garbage collection. And so we need to realize that we're all in this together. There's no way that you can separate the demographic change from the well-being of the future nation. And so with that, you know, we're all about making sure that we're building a diverse and inclusive economy so that we don't get to the year 2050 and find out that we have created something that none of us want to live in. So the Closing the Racial Wealth Gap initiative just released a new report called Beyond Broke: Why the Racial Wealth Gap is Important for National Economic Security. And we make the case that the racial wealth gap is critically important for ensuring that we have a strong economy in the future, and that policymakers need to make decisions now that will go towards making sure that the investments are there for the future. And so the report just highlights a number of key facts. That, you know, for every dollar in wealth held by the typical white family, the typical African American and Latino family only has 6 and 7 cents respectively. It also points out that there is a racial gap in liquid assets. And so, you know, households of color are on the margins of the economy. They are less likely to have any cash assets that can last them 3 months without income. And so that means that these are economically vulnerable families, and we need to be doing more to look at how to actually build assets in these communities so that they can be, their economic security can be strong over their lifetimes. In the Beyond Broke report, we actually call for a number of recommendations. Because the nature of the racial wealth gap is so multifaceted, we're talking about everything from education to housing to savings and investments to, you know, you name it, we've got it, to banking. I mean, there are a number of facets here that are important for the economic security of families of color. And so, you know, we even call for new proposals. So there is one called the Baby Bond Trust Fund that focuses on endowing every child in America actually with a savings account, if you will, that's actually seeded by the federal government. Lower income families, lower asset families will have actually more contributions to that account. There will be a guaranteed interest rate and it will grow over time. And so when that child actually reaches the point of maturity, they have an asset for which they can then purchase a college education or a home or a business. We think that this is an innovative idea whose time has come. Our report actually shows that households of color have not actually recovered from the Great Recession or the subprime mortgage lending crisis that preceded it. In fact, households of color lost half of their net worth immediately following the Great Recession, and they haven't recovered and they haven't received the benefits of the recovery. So we think that our report shines a spotlight on the fact that the recovery, it hasn't been a recovery for everyone, and that we need to have sustained and focused attention to how to help these households regain their wealth. We are calling on Congress and the administration and the regulators to make sure that future mortgage settlements are fair and transparent. And for this reason, we're asking for information. We want to know who's getting the money by race, ethnicity, gender, geography. We need data collection so that we can know that the resources are going to the communities that need them most. The racial wealth gap was created by public policy, and in order to get out of this gap, we actually need to use public policy. People, tend to forget that we have a long history of exclusion in this nation, and it's for every population of color. For Native Americans, the taking of the land and the forcing on reservations, then the assimilation policies for African Americans, slavery, Jim Crow, labor market discrimination. For Latinos, labor market discrimination, exclusion through citizenship. For Asians, internment, exclusion through citizenship, and even laws passed that actually prevented Asian Americans from actually owning businesses in the 20th century, early part of the 20th century. And so we have this long and ugly and bigoted history that has served to create a situation where these populations are far behind economically. When we're talking about asset building, people tend to think that, it's just about, private savings accounts, private checking accounts, private businesses. But the reality is that vulnerable households actually require public and private assets. And what do I mean by public assets? People put their tax money into Social Security, and that's an asset for them. It's going to be a critical asset that they use for retirement security, for disability benefits, for survivor benefits. Same thing with Medicare, same thing with unemployment insurance. These are social insurance programs that are assets that are important for the economic security of all families in America, not just families of color. But we include it as a part of the portfolio because we can't afford to actually erode these programs. These families rely on it. The private sector is such that less than half of families of color actually have access to private pensions, and so Social Security is all they have. And so when we're talking about asset diversification and a large portfolio of assets, we include both public and private assets.